What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Entering a new decade often inspires people to look back over the past 10 years and reevaluate all that's happened. So we might as well do the same with Pokémon. This past decade started with Gen 5 back on the standard DS, and went all the way through Sword and Shield on the Switch. That's a long time, where a lot of things can happen. But I thought it might be fun to look back at the best and worst of certain topics that fall within the previous 10 years, as we look forward to the next chapter in the franchise. So, here are the top best and worst of Pokémon over the last decade. Let's start with the main topic of the Pokémon games themselves, and to me, the worst Pokémon to come out in the past decade is Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Now, I don't hate these titles, but they should have been groundbreaking. But as it turns out, they were just a heaping spoonful of everything that we already knew about the games. You could comfortably count all of the genuine surprises without removing your shoes, because there's next to nothing that you didn't already expect from Kanto this time around. And actually, there's even less than the last time we were there, because at least then you could trade in different Pokémon after. Despite being the first major Pokémon games to move over to a home console, they had the smallest Pokédex in generations. The partner system wasn't a huge innovation that it claimed to be either, essentially boiling down to an intrusive Pokémon-Ami session. Not to mention the Pokéball accessory they pawned off on us that doesn't work with any other games. That's not to say that I hated these games at all, as some people seem to have out there, because there were parts that I enjoyed. But the changes to the capture system and the lack of wild battles somehow made it even more tedious than other Pokémon games out there. There was just so much riding on these games, but it felt like they were shipped while only being half done, which is why I think of them as the worst offering that we got. Now for the best Pokémon games, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I honestly wasn't expecting this, thinking about each of the new entries during the past 4 gens, but once I was reminded of Oros, it became a clear victor. Now, while here in the States we didn't get Heart Gold and Soul Silver until 2010, it did premiere in Japan in 2009, so it just missed out, leaving the Hoenn region remakes in Gen 6 as the best. These entries completely reinvigorated this region, that had previously been a pale 2D paper cutout, by making the entire terrain lush and vibrant. And to better take it in, why not go ahead and soar through the skies on a legendary Pokémon? A feature that has never been seen before or since. Not to mention the Dex Nav being another amazing one-off aspect of this game that was pretty universally beloved. Oros also made up for the Kalos region being unfinished by actually giving us some post-game this time around, including the Delta episode and tons of other legendaries dotted around the region. The general length of the game is right in the sweet spot of not being too long or too short, and the game walks the line between being challenging for new players, but still entertaining for veterans who know what to expect. Some others might insist that a new game should be considered the best, but to me, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire just have the best mix of fun, intuitive gameplay with added story beats to keep it interesting. Plus, they came out when the 3D models were still new and exciting, instead of just reusing them outright for 2 more generations. Not to mention that these games are the last time to date that you can have a fully completed Pokédex that displayed every single Pokémon in your game. So for all those reasons and more, to me, Oros are the best games of the past decade. Man, I should really play those games again. Now for the worst overall Pokémon of the past decade is, in my mind, Simipour. The 3 monkeys together get some undeserved hate, but this third one deserves it all and then some. It's far worse than the other 2 with its weird dress and its dumb flatline eyes. But I've already talked down about its looks before. It's just a completely below average Pokémon all around. It should be normal in water for how bland it is. It also has the exact same stat distributions as the other 2, so it's not exactly going to outshine them in any meaningful way. Nor does it have anything to distinguish it from the other numerous water types that can be found in any given region. This maritime monkey is just one of the most embarrassing Pokémon out there, and I'd be fine if they permanently deleted it. But before you call me a Gen 1er and say that I'm just hating on Gen 5, wait for the best Pokémon of the decade, Golurk. This Pokémon hails from long ago, with its origins still being somewhat of a mystery. All we know is that people formed them a long time ago to help, and that they still work today, giving us our only look into their long-gone civilization. They run on some sort of mystical energy that nobody can really explain. But they can shoot lasers and fly around like Iron Man. The Dex even says that some old castles were built with artillery platforms just for Golurk to blast everything. The last sentinels of a great society. And the Golurk line can be found somewhere in every single region since its debut. So clearly the people that made them had a global empire. But as far as the Pokémon itself goes, Golurk can actually fly, along with the gaggle of other amazing moves this ancient automaton can learn. It could literally have a move to be super effective against any Pokémon out there. But this ground and ghost type is a pinnacle of great Pokémon design mixed with a useful move pool with some fascinating lore, which in my mind makes it the best Pokémon to come out in the past 10 years. Next, let's talk about abilities. For the worst, I'd have to say it's Aroma Veil. Now this ability is scarcely known and even more rarely used. This started as the signature hidden ability of the Aromatisse line, so already it's extremely of limited use. But Aroma Veil is described as protecting themselves and their allies from attacks that affect their mental state. All that really means is that it prevents limiting the Pokémon's move selection, so no taunting and no tormenting. That's, I guess that could help in battle, but it's incredibly niche, not to mention a hidden ability devoted to something that usually either wears off or can just be undone by switching out. And it's only on a terrible fairy type that only just recently had got added to another pure fairy type, but still, it's so arbitrary and not so useful as other Veil abilities that block crippling status conditions. But the best ability of the decade pretty much has to be Protean. Now I doubt this is most people out there, but there are some that are under the delusion that it is pronounced protein, like the in-game item, but please just Google Protean for a second, because it essentially means to be versatile and flexible, which is spot on for this ability that lets you change into any type at will. Granted, you can only have 4 different moves at any given time, but you could still easily create a loop of resistances that can help you take out a foe before they can catch on. Of course, the only Pokémon with this ability right now are the Greninja line and Kecleon. But the ability is so good that Sword and Shield made an exact copy. That's how uniquely influential the advantages to the Protean ability can be. In a similar vein, let's talk about the moves over the past 10 years as well. Starting with the worst, which is actually a tie for me, with Gear Up and Magnetic Flux. Now these moves provide buffs for Pokémon, which is a valid strategy, and many moves are devoted to it. But these ones are far too specific. Both of these moves are only applicable to Pokémon with the plus or minus ability, which are only abilities that interact with each other. Magnetic Flux at least has some passable coverage on different monsters, but only 3 of them can even get the abilities that'll make it work. And Gear Up is even worse because it's only 2 Pokémon that can learn it in the game are Klinklang and Magearna, and only Klinklang can make use of it. So if you really wanted to buff this pile of gears, you could use these moves, but having 2 moves for 2 separate abilities with almost no overlap between them makes me put these 2 at the bottom. However, the best move of the decade is probably not a surprise, because I'm going to say Scald. I'm always a huge fan of moves with full accuracy, so this water-type move with 80 power is fairly solid on its own. But then you get into the special secondary effect of this move, and learn that shooting this boiling hot water actually has a chance to burn the target. This is literally a game changer. Burning the foe not only chips away their health every turn, but also cuts their physical attack. This slight possibility, only 30% every time you use the move, is enough for almost the entire competitive scene to rely solely on this water move over others with greater power. The smallest bit of luck can change a battle in your favor, and Scald provides that to dozens of water types out there, and even fortunate others that can get coverage with this great fringe benefit. It definitely is one of the most abused moves in the game for a reason. So even if you're sick of the cheap tactics, you have to admit its abundant prominence is for a reason. Now, in the past decade, Pokémon games have taken to producing their fair share of gimmicks. So let's take a look at those, starting with the worst, which to me would be Z-moves. Now, I'm not too crazy about Mega Evolutions or anything either, but the gimmick that followed it in Gen 7 somehow fell even more flat. The idea of Mega Evolutions for moves is neat in theory, but the practice made it such a slog to get through. The animations take forever to watch, so it's actually good that you can only use it once per battle, otherwise you'd be able to take a nap in between each turn. It was nice that every Pokémon had the power to use a Z-move, and that some of them had their own unique ones as well, but they were just too time-consuming in the narrative of the game for casual players, and hated for their overpowered usage in the metagame. Plus, as a personal note, I always hated the way that Z-moves would be wasted on Protect or something. The least you can do if you're going to give every Pokémon a nuke option is make it so that it can't be squandered so easily. And plus, nobody really complained when we found out that these weren't gonna come back. By contrast, the best gimmick in recent years to me is regional variants. This one isn't as popular with some people out there, but to me, it's one of the most natural things that they could have done in the Pokémon world. Just like our own planet, animals vary in different climates and locations, so it makes sense to me that Pokémon might be different as well, if faced with alternative circumstances. I won't say that I love every single regional form out there, but I do think that the concept is solid. Even the new aspect of varied evolutions is more appealing to me than random, sporadic forms that only emerge during battles, like Megas or Gigantamaxing, that clearly morph the Pokémon's body into painful and unnatural ways. Simply having their surroundings impact the way a Pokémon can change is not only cool, but just makes it easy for any given Pokémon to be updated in the future, since this seems to be the one gimmick that they didn't immediately kick to the curb the next generation. Next we'll cover gym leaders, as well as trial captains, which is fortunate because the worst one of the decade is Ilima. I think that's his name. I don't know because nobody even gives him a second thought after you leave the first island, which everybody can't wait to get off of anyway. Gym leaders, or trial captains, are supposed to be vibrant characters that help give you an idea of what the region represents. But this guy is just a weird preppy kid who specializes in the blandest type out there. That could have been a nice excuse to use a Stuffle, but nope. He had a Yungoos and another random non-Alola Pokémon. And furthermore, according to the Dex, Yungoos isn't even technically from the Alola region, but was introduced as pest control, so he doesn't even use any Alolan exclusives. But I've probably already said more about this vaguely creepy prep school dropout than he deserves, so we'll move on to the best. And to me, I think that title should go to Korrina. Now, she is a fighting-type trainer, but she's just so good that she can even overcome my least favorite type. First of all, her gimmick could get tiring, like how Grant's Rock Wall just became tedious after a while. But she uses the skate motif well in her own ensemble, and the gym itself, having to use the new skate mechanic to grind on rails and jump over ramps. But the actual gym is only one facet of this leader, since you encounter her numerous times outside in your travels as well. Korrina is connected to the mysteries of Mega Evolution, being the first person to give you a Mega-capable Pokémon by gifting you one of her Lucario. She's also special enough to get completely separate artwork for these battles, and has a unique trainer class to this day, being called Successor Korrina. This is also reflected in the anime, with Korrina having the distinction of being the gym leader to appear in the most episodes, outside of the ones that became regular characters. Korrina's positive personality is enough to make you take note on its own, but combined with her diverse roles in the Pokémon world, making her a well-rounded person, you can't help but hand her the crown of being the best of the decade. Now, to switch gears slightly, I wanted to talk about events that happened in the real world, because that is definitely a factor in how people might remember this time in the franchise. And there's a lot to choose from. Pokémon Go was introduced in the past 10 years after all, as well as Pokémon Bank, and the first live-action Pokémon movie in theaters, and the distributions for all of the mythicals. But it's probably no surprise that the worst real-life event to happen to Pokémon in the past 10 years is the whole Dexit fiasco. Sword and Shield were plugging along so well. Everyone seemed to be loving the trailers, and then the folks in charge let slip that not every Pokémon would be in these new games. Well, any goodwill that they had garnered was instantly gone, and the fandom resorted to infighting, with some people defending the choice due to logistics, but others doing deep dives to compare the updated models to the old ones. And the whole thing is actually still somewhat playing out. But whatever happens, this will undoubtedly turn out to be a defining moment in the Pokémon franchise, and continue to be talked about for years to come. But there have been many good moments too, and to me, the best thing to happen in the franchise in the past decade was the release of the original games on the Virtual Console. Not only would it be incredibly hard to locate an original cartridge these days, but the battery's probably dead anyway. So making the first generation playable again was a dream to many. Whether they held up or not is up to individual taste, I suppose. But despite being alive in the original heyday of Pokémon, I wasn't able to have a Game Boy at the time. So aside from jealously playing a friend's copy for a couple of minutes, this was a prime opportunity for folks like me who missed out the first time around. But even more than that, the Virtual Console releases of Generation 1 and 2 provides a chance for new patrons as well. There are Pokémon fans that weren't even born when these games came out, so their renewed availability could provide exposure to young ones who never would have been able to know what these games were like. They might end up hating them for how slow and buggy they are, but that would only make them appreciate the efficiency of the newer versions even more. But they could also grow to love them. Being able to load up an old favorite from the first 2 gens anytime on your DS that had previously been left in the dust, cut off from all of the rest, has to be the best thing to happen in the past 10 years for the franchise. And hopefully, as the systems keep advancing, it's a trend that they can continue. Please? And finally, I thought it might be fun to be a little introspective and look back on this channel as a whole. Now, while I've not been doing this anywhere close to 10 years, the 2010s is when the Emperor Cubone channel launched. So look forward to the next decade where there will be a lot more to talk about. So it's only fair to start with the worst, and while there are certainly a number of contenders, to me it's probably a little watched video about the phases of Solgaleo and Lunala. It had something to do with how their glow in these barely acknowledged phases looks like when Necrozma is fused with them. I don't even really know what I was saying, I was just trying to do a conspiracy theory video, but it's probably okay if you skipped over that one. And the best, to me, would still have to be the top 6 best and worst signature abilities. This video not only solidified a prominent series for the channel, but also just struck a great blend of comedy, storytelling, and a balance of fact and opinion that's hard to top. The topic itself seemed unique as well, since abilities in general seem somewhat neglected, when signature ones are very niche subjects that don't really get a lot of coverage. Not to mention, the top 6 signature abilities video was the first one ever to break 1 million total views just over a year of its release, meaning it's a bona fide breakout hit. So I am very pleased that the effort I put into that one has been appreciated by so many. So, those are just some of the best and worst of Pokémon over the past 10 years. There are certainly many more categories that could be included, so let me know yours down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!